Hey now Brawlers, today we're going to take a look at Khrysos Hunters from the Flux Capacity. Now, okay, as a side note, I'm just going to say, I hate it when companies purposely misspell very common words to put into their title. Khrysos being spelled K-H-R-Y-S-O-S. Come on, this is dumb. Anyways, I digress. In Khrysos Hunters, you take control of a group of adventurers going through, I don't know, I guess it's supposed to be like a dungeon or some sort of overworld or something that's full of treasure. You're trying to get to 12 treasure before everyone else does. And along the way, you're probably going to have to beat them up and possibly steal their treasure as well. I've never played it, but this sounds a lot like the premise of that old Dreamcast game Power Stone, where you're running around a map trying to grab these stones and also beating people up in the same time. Maybe that's the vibe that they were going for, but you have all these different characters that you're using, all their different powers and such. There's not really much else to say here, so let's just go ahead and do a brief overview of the game, then we're going to come back. I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Khrysos Hunters. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. I think if you buy the expansion pack, it will go up to 6 players. And the goal is to gain 12 treasures. The theme of this game is, I don't know, it's kind of weird. You're like futuristic, fantasy, adventurers going through like dungeons or temples or something like that, and you're trying to just gain these little gems that count as treasure. And again, the first person to get to 12 treasures is going to be the winner. But there's going to be a constant back and forth of you running around this dungeon trying to get the treasures, but also trying to stymie your opponents. Now, each player is going to get one of these little treasure scoring cards in their appropriate color. So it goes from 1 to 6, or 0 to 6, I should say, and then 6 to 12 on the back. And every player is going to be dealt out these hunter cards, which represent the current character that you have. You'll actually use your hunter card in conjunction with your treasure card to keep track of your treasure, like so. You'll also get a die of your appropriate color, and your die is actually going to be what you use to move around the board. And also the face of the die, whatever the current face is, or your current hit points, so from 6 down to 1. So at the beginning, you're going to also lay out the map as well. Now, there's a bunch of map cards that come with the game, and this is just one of the map setups that they recommend in the book, but you can really do it however you want as long as they're connected and contiguous. And the important part of this, you have different stairs and you have different little walls that you can't necessarily shoot through, little types of difficult terrain, things like that. But the most important part are these little treasure spots. These are not only where you're going to be starting the game with your little dice pawns, but also where treasure is going to randomly spawn. So at the beginning of the game and on every subsequent turn, you're going to roll the die, the white die that comes with the game, doesn't match up to any of the character colors, and whatever number comes up, you're going to put a treasure, and any of these little tokens, the white ones presumably, on whatever numbered treasure spot that corresponds to on the map. And if you're playing with more cards, there may be multiples of the same number. So with a bigger map, you might have several number 4 treasure spots, in which case you'll drop a treasure on each of those. Once you've done that, when you're into the normal gameplay, whatever number comes up on the die is also how much energy you have on your turn to spend with your current hunter. And there's 2 different things you can do with that energy. One is that you can just move around the map. So for every energy that you spend, you can move 1 space. You can go diagonal in this game, although you can't do it around these black corners, and I don't know if you could do it around the edges of the map. That's one of the many questions I have that the rules don't seem to answer. So you can spend your energy to move. You can also use your energy to do your character's special ability. So let's take a look at a few of these now. And I should also mention that you're actually going to get a team of adventurers at the beginning of the game. Depending on the number of players, you're going to get 3 or 4 of these adventurers. You'll you'll get a whole hand of them. Choose one to start with at the beginning of the game. If that one ever gets knocked out by your opponents, or you willingly retire them, then you're going to be able to choose another one. Anytime you're knocked out by your opponents, they get to steal 2 treasure from you. If you willingly retire them, which means they have to be at 1 hit point at the start of your turn, you still lose 2 treasure, but your opponents don't get it, and then you draw a new one from your stack. If you ever run out of the adventurers that you're dealt at the beginning of the game, you can just take one from the ones that aren't being used. I don't know, I guess. So here's some examples of the characters. You have Blinker here, and it's kind of hard to tell, I know, with my camera, but there's a lot of little iconography here and different symbols, and there's numbers off to the side. These correspond to the amount of energy you're going to spend in order to use one of these abilities. Each ability can only be used once. You can move multiple times, but you can only use an action, is what they're actually called. You can only use a specific action once, but you can do multiple actions if you have enough energy. So if you rolled a 6, you can go ahead and do your number 6 ability, which is usually very, very powerful. Or let's say you had 6 energy, you can do it. You can do a number 1 action and a number 3 action, and then a number 2 action, all adding up to 6. You can do those 3 actions in any order that you want. So you can dispense your energy as you see fit. Now the thing about this iconography, it's a little confusing at first, but it's actually very simple. So anytime that you see a green arrow, and I know I do apologize, you can't really see it that well, but green arrows will let you move that number of spaces. Anytime there's a number or a value that's outside of a box, a very light box that's on the card, that affects you. So you do that ability, you'll move first, then you'll do whatever's in the box, which could be something like hit. So anytime you see crosshairs that says hit, that means you're going to be able to hit that many people or do that many attacks against however many targets you want, including the same target multiple times. Then there'll be a range value that tells you how far away that character can be, how much damage it may do, or other special abilities. Like some of them might say trap, which forces them to not be able to move, which is the purple spiral, while others might be stun, which means that they can move, but they can't use any of their special abilities, which means it's going to be very hard to damage other people. There's other things like guard. If you're able to guard, you're going to take some of these guard tokens, which until the end of your next turn you can discard instead of taking damage. Let's see, other different types of things. There's trample abilities. This is one of my favorite characters, by the way. If it's a trample ability, you get to move and hit every single person that you move through, because in this game you can move through other players' spaces, and I think you could stop on them. That's another thing that's not clear in the rules. And so on. So you get all these different special abilities, and all the characters' special abilities are different. You have Burn here, who's all about movement. You have Dr. Ed, who does a lot of damage and crazy things between swapping characters. Salvo, who also is all about dealing a ton of damage. In Villana. So lots of different characters to choose from. You're going to take your character, move your die throughout the facility, trying to get these treasures. Now, every treasure that you run over or stop on, you're going to be able to take. And again, I guess if a treasure starts where you are, you just take it automatically, or take it when you move out. Not really sure, but that's your whole goal. Every time you take one of the tokens, you'll move your treasure down, and hopefully you'll be the first one to get to 12. But if people see you're ahead, they're going to constantly be trying to beat the crap out of you in order to steal your treasure, or at least just knock you down and stymie your progress. The one last thing I'll say about the character cards tying in with treasure is that some of the character cards, oh man, you're definitely not going to be able to see this, but there is a very, very tiny black diamond on some icons on your card. Those only affect your ability. Those only come into play if you have that much treasure. As soon as you have that much treasure, it effectively enhances your abilities and gives you more power. There's also boosts, which you can save for a later turn, and so on. I mean, that's really the game. You're running around this dungeon area with your character, trying to grab treasure, trying to beat the crap out of your opponents when applicable, and just trying to be the first one to 12. Very simple game. Let's get to my final thoughts. Now, Khrysos Hunters is a small game, so maybe I shouldn't have had very high expectations for it being this like grand, epic thing, but really, when you open that box and when you see the variable map that you can make, and you have these really cool character cards with a ton of different special abilities, like every character is a little bit different with their abilities, and the artwork is pretty good, even though it's very cramped up top on the top of the card. But because of all these things, I really thought that there was going to be possibly more to this game than I should have expected, when the reality is, as you play through it, it's really kind of dumb. I don't want to be too harsh here. It's very, very light. You're running around grabbing treasure. There's really no thought involved. I mean, that's your goal, is to grab that treasure. It's just a matter of how efficiently you're going to do that, whether it's just running around and grabbing the stones as quickly as possible, or inevitably having to just beat people up and take theirs. The thing is, because of the randomness of the game, first off, you don't know where a treasure is going to pop up. And if you're very lucky, it will end up in the spot where you're at, which we assume you pick it up automatically. And I say assume because it's not anywhere we could have found in the book, and the book is pretty awful. The rules, it's just, they're not written very well. It's such a simple game with so few rules involved that you would think that they wouldn't miss a lot of obvious things, like can you cut corners around the edges of the map? Do you just pick up treasure automatically, or do you have to move out and back in, or just out once and then you pick it up? Does it, or if you do pick it up automatically, does it happen on someone else's turn if it pops up in their space? Can you stay in one? It says you can go through people's squares, but can you stay in their square and share it with them? These things aren't made implicitly clear, at least that I saw in the rule book, along with a few other things as well. Why couldn't you play this with more than 4 players with other people if you just grab more dice? Why? I don't see why not. I mean, there's a separate expansion that you buy that has to put it up to 6, but why couldn't you just do it yourself with the characters that you have? These things aren't made very clear. The rulebook is not a big help in that regard. And while I can forgive a bigger, grandiose game for missing some tiny things that may not happen very frequently, these things came up in every game of this that I played, and the game is very simple. How could you miss these things? Okay, I'm not going to harp on that too much. Getting back to the core gameplay and what I know about it. Like I said, it's very light, and there is some decision making to be had because you have all these cool special abilities. And that's the thing that I probably will say that I like the most about this game, are the characters and their special powers. I love that idea. I love that people have these different swaps. The iconography is tough to get through, I will say. Once you get it down, that's probably I mean, the game can be explained in 5 minutes, but a good chunk of that 5 minutes is explaining how the iconography breaks down. And even then, there's going to be some questions during the game. But once you get it, and it feels cool that everyone can do these special things. Like one of my favorite characters is really, really good at moving, just racing around the map. Another character damages herself, but gets these cool effects that help her damage other people even more. One guy is just like a big walking tank. So you have these different feeling characters. Absolutely the best thing about the game, and I love that. But whether or not you can actually use these special powers is totally up to a random die roll that determines your energy for the turn. And this isn't just like a small amount of luck injected into the game. This is a huge thing. There are times in your deepest, darkest, direst hour when you are at death's door, you're at 2 hit points, which is the worst position to be in because you can only voluntarily retire yourself at 1 hit point, and still lose 2 treasure, but at least someone else doesn't get it. You're stuck at 2 hit points, so you're easy pickings for anyone that's near you to take your treasure, and you roll a 1. And what are you going to do? Unless you're on the other side of the map, which is tough on the smaller maps, you're stuck. Someone's going to beat you up, someone's going to take your treasure, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then you lose 2 treasure, you come back as another guy, but the other people are still ahead of you. So it's like a race game in that regard, but not a terribly fun one. So there's things I want to love about this game. I feel that it's probably too light, too random, and it's a little too long for what it should be. I mean, it doesn't even end as quickly, and it seems to be that with the more players that gets worse because it's just a constant back and forth, especially if the map is too small. You're just beating each other up constantly. Gems are just constantly switching back and forth, and it takes a while for someone just by pure luck to pull ahead of the pack and pull out that win, and it doesn't feel very satisfying at that point. So I don't think I can recommend this one. I can't say that I'm giving up on it fully because I might want to check out that expansion, but for right now, this is most definitely a try before you buy. I cannot give this a full-on endorsement because of just the bad rules and the lightness of it and the randomness. But I love the adventurer cards. I love the concept. I'd like to see probably a bigger version of this. Or maybe this version exists and it's called Chaos Ball, which is, where you're running around strategic points in the maps and trying to get points by staying there. But just the randomness of the stones coming out and whether or not you can actually do anything on your turn kind of kills this one for me. I may give it another shot with the expansion. I may not, but for now I can't recommend it. That's Khrysos Hunters from the Flux Capacity. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.